and thank you for joining us today. My name's Alice Hutchings. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computer Science and Technology at the University of Cambridge, where I specialise in cybercrime. The research I'm going to be talking to you about today was done with my colleague Sergio Pastrana, who is now at the Carlos III University of Madrid. And in particular, I'll be talking to you about something called eWhoring. Now, eWhoring is the term that's used by those engaging in this particular activity. It's not something that we came up with ourselves. And it's used to describe a social engineering technique where they imitate partners in virtual sexual encounters. In this type of fraud, victims are asked for money in exchange for pictures, videos, and so on for sexual-related conversations. eWhoring has been around for about a decade now, at least 8 years, and before we came along and looked at this, it had not received any academic attention. We came across eWhoring through our work on online underground forums, and we were quite intrigued about what was happening here, and so decided to undertake this research. So eWhoring is exploitative. It involves taking images of usually young women and selling these online, often without the consent of the people who are being depicted. It is also unlawful, so it includes fraud by misrepresentation, as the people trading the images are not being truthful about who they are. It also involves the possession and distribution of indecent images of children. So in some of our later work, we've actually been able to find that the images that are being traded in some cases are actually child exploitation material. So there's legal risks for those who are engaging in this practice. It can also involve the redistribution of material leaked in what is often termed revenge porn. Now this includes the distribution of material that was once shared consensually within, say, a trusted relationship, but once that relationship has broken down, it's shared by one of the parties online. And we find in some cases that those images are being stolen and distributed for eWhoring purposes. And it can also include the redistribution of copyright material. So, for example, some of the images are being taken of pornography actresses and shared that way as well. So, we started looking at eWhoring using a framework called crime script analysis. So crime script analysis borrows from cognitive science and this idea of schemata, that there's ways of thinking about the world that allows us to behave appropriately in response to other stimuli. So it kind of identifies the various steps that are involved in carrying out any type of activity, and we use the term crime script analysis when applying this to criminal activity. It allows us to understand the various steps involved in carrying out a particular type of crime, and also the different ways that this script can vary. So in this research we particularly looked at variations to the script and other tracks that offenders may go down that are not the traditional way of doing things. Now, crime script analysis is, again, very much like a script where it involves things like scenes and actors and props and so forth. So this really allows us to identify the types of actors that are involved in carrying out this fraud. And the final thing is that it allows us to identify points for intervention. So rather than just thinking about, the end product of a crime, the end point, it allows us to think the various steps that are involved. How can we actually step in and stop that particular, maybe an early step, which would then disrupt things later down the line as well? So the restaurant script is often used as an example of crime script analysis. So when you want to go to a restaurant, there's various things that you need to do to make that happen. So sometimes you might need to ring and make a reservation. You need to enter the restaurant, read the menu, make your selection, order, eat, pay, and exit. So this is just an example. If we think about similar ways that you kind of enter into engaging in crime and also exit out of it. And if you think about the restaurant script, there's various ways that you might actually try and intervene here. You might cut off somebody's phone line to stop them being able to ring the restaurant. You could close the restaurant to stop them entering. You could make the menu unreadable. You can make the selections unappetizing. You can distract the waiter so they can't order. You could put dishwashing liquid over their food so they can't eat it. You can take down the payment terminal so they can't pay, and you could also barricade the door so they can't leave. So it's an example about how you might actually use the script to identify points for intervention. So for our particular research, we used what's called the Crime BB dataset. This is made available through the Cambridge Cybercrime Centre, where I'm actually the Deputy Director. We make this data available for all academic researchers, and this particular dataset includes data scraped from underground forums. Now, one of those forums is Hack Forums. It's the biggest such forum that's available, and it's been operating for over 10 years. At the time we looked at it for this research, it had over 40 million posts and 500,000 user accounts, so that has since grown. And in particular, we were interested on about the dedicated board on eWhoring. So this particular board receives about 5,000 posts a month, and there's about 100 forum users per month writing posts on here for the first time, so it's quite active. And we can see that in comparison to other boards on the forum, it is one of the more interesting and active ones. So it's the second most number of posts per month after premium sellers, and it certainly has grown over the past few years, taking over from remote access toolkits, the sale of online accounts and botnets and so forth, and it's up there with premium sellers. And it's also attracting quite a few new members a month. One of the currently the board that's attracting the most new members a month. So this is really one of the reasons why we became quite interested in this. So in order to generate the data for this analysis, we extracted threads that provided guides or tutorials on the eWhoring board, and we extracted over 6,500 posts written by over 2,400 members, and we used qualitative content analysis methods for the research using the framework provided from crime script analysis. So we actually looked at what stage of the script each post was referring to, and what insights it provided us with. And we do provide some quotes here just to protect my reputation. These are actually provided verbatim, and my spelling is not quite as atrocious as this. So this is just an example post on Hack Forums. You can see on the top left that it's on the hacks, exploits and various discussions, beginner hacking, and then eWhoring subforum. Underneath that you can see that it's listed as being a tutorial within the square brackets, and these are the types of posts that we're interested in, and the thread title is How to eWhore the Right Way. And so this was the type of data that we looked at for our analysis. Now, I'll provide you with a bit more terminology. Now, these three particular terms are ones that we used for our analysis. It's not necessarily what the actors use, but we refer to actors as those who are actively engaging in eWhoring and or discussing these activities. The customers are those purchasing or potentially purchasing images, and the models are those depicted in the images with or without their consent. Now, this terminology and the following one are actually terms that are used by actors themselves. So packs are selections of photographs and sometimes videos depicting the same model. So you will have a selection of photos in various poses and so forth. And then a VCW is referring to a video cam whore, and this is not my term, but the description that is given by one actor on the forum is a VCW is a program that can control certain videos to smoothly bridge over each other. For example, your girl is just sitting there looking around. You can make her wave if you have the required videos of it, of course. So this is an example of what a GUI or graphical user interface might look like for a VCW, and the actor can actually control the actions that the model is doing. And often these are quite low quality videos, and that actually is useful for hiding the transition between the different actions. So we actually found there's 9 various stages in the script, or different scenes, and I'll go a little bit more into depth with each of these. First we have learning the techniques, then obtaining images, creating a backstory, creating alias and opening accounts, sourcing traffic, negotiation, receiving payment, sending images, blocking or continue to milk customers, and then finally there is exchanging funds. So I'll provide a little bit more information. The first one is learning techniques. So it's important to understand that eWhoring is not an intuitive business model. You wouldn't just kind of wake up and decide that you're going to start selling images of other people in various stages of undress online and charge money for this. But this is actually something that people become exposed to through their interactions on hack forums. And there's quite a lot of information and techniques that are openly shared on the forum. There's an explicit provision of learning. Some of these are freely shared and some are plagiarized. Now, there's reasons why people will openly share this information. One reason is that they might actually be selling things like packs of images, which means that they can generate customers for this trade through encouraging them to become involved in eWhoring. And also people share information in order to generate reputation, which is a way of establishing trust on the platform. We find that there's a spectrum of tutorials and learning techniques across the board. So there's quite general overview of basic methods, and then you also find very specific step-by-step instructions for very particular aspects of techniques. So for example, how to create a VCW, or how to negotiate with the customer. So the next thing you need to do if you're to engage in eWhoring is obtain images, and we find that packs and VCWs are available for sale on hack forums, and you can also they're also available for free as well. These tend to become quite saturated, and so the method doesn't last very long if they're available for free. But preferred are large packs that include both explicit images, so nudes, as well as clothed images of the same model. And the clothed images are used as kind of teasers, the images that you might use in your advertisement or in your profile, and in order to then try and attract customers. And low quality amateur images are actually preferred over professional images because it makes it more realistic that this is somebody selling photos in their bedroom. There's various advice available for sourcing images. So some of the places that people go to include pornography sites, social media sites such as Facebook, revenge porn sites, as was mentioned earlier. There are dedicated sites set up for sharing consensually obtained and shared images after relationship sours. You can also people also engage in social engineering, so tricking other people into sharing images of themselves that are then distributed on. Some Pornography sites allow you to record live shows, and this can be used to request certain poses, and I'll explain why that would be required in a moment. And also, some actors indicate that they obtain their images consensually from models, so their friends who are okay with them being shared in this way. So I mentioned that being able to request certain poses can be beneficial. One of the reasons for this is it can be a good idea to have what's called a verification image. So a verification template is one that you can modify on request by a customer. So if a customer is a little bit suspicious and they suspect it's not actually the person they're speaking to that is in the images, they might request that the actor provide some proof. So have their name written on a piece of paper or somewhere on their body, put their hands in a certain gesture, and so on. So there's a need for images that allow space for, say, a name to be written on. Now, interestingly, one way that has been suggested to obtain these images is actually capitalizing on the A4 challenge. Now, for those who don't remember this challenge, it was from about 2016, a social media challenge where young people were sharing images of themselves holding a piece of A4 paper to demonstrate how thin they were. Now, of course, holding a blank piece of A4 paper is ideal for being used for a template, particularly as a lot of people had bare torsos for this. So there was some suggestions people would search for A4 challenge and then use those that were suitable to match the models as a template for verification. Now, the next step is creating an alias. You want to have a fictitious identity for each model that is being used. So this would include a name, their demographic information, so example, are they a student? Why do they need money? What's their story for that? And it's important that this be both consistent and unique. So when I say consistent, it needs to be consistent for that model. There's a possibility that the customer may pose as somebody else in order to, again, verify if this is the actor is who they say they are. And so if you're consistent, then the actor can try and maintain a plausible story. But it also needs to be unique. So if the actor is actually controlling various models, it has information on various models, photographs, and is selling this on, say, the same platform, then they would actually have to have a unique name and backstory for each of those models in case the same customer contacts more than one of the accounts that they've created. So for each model, then they would require an email address, and this is required to set up other accounts as well. So it's the first account that will be opened, but they also need to open other communication platforms depending on how they're communicating with clients. So this might include, as examples, Skype, Kik, Snapchat, Facebook, and even SMS. Now, the other accounts that need to be open include payment platforms in order to receive payment. The most common types of platforms that were discussed were PayPal as well as Amazon gift cards. But there's also some other interesting and sometimes innovative suggestions, including things like opening accounts on freelancing sites and directing customers to that. And then the other account that needs to be opened is on places to attract traffic. So this is where you would meet your customers. And we found over 170 unique websites and applications being suggested as traffic sources. And these included most popularly chat rooms, many of which had adult themes. Also video chat sites such as Omegle and Chat Roulette. Social networking sites, amateur pornography sites, classified sites like Craigslist, dating sites, as well as online gaming platforms. So the next step involved is actually sourcing traffic, so advertising in order to meet customers, and there's different ways this can be done. So actors can either openly advertise that they're selling photographs and cam shows, or they can broach the subject after they've actually initiated communication with a potential customer. So example of openly advertising is something like in need of cash, ASAP, selling my pictures and maybe more, PM for details. Whereas if you were first going to start a discussion with somebody and then offer to do a trade, you might get people to add you on Skype, and then put the social skills to work, and after initial kind of chatting up your customer, broach the subject of doing a trade after that. So sourcing traffic actually is when you would move potential customers away from the communication platform that they were first met on. So it was often suggested that if you, for example, met somebody, a potential customer on a dating site, that you would not continue the trade discussion on that site. You would actually move it to a separate communication platform for that purpose. And the type of communication platform will depend on the type of images that are being traded. So if they still images, you might have something like email, but if it's going to be VCWs, then you would have to have some kind of platform for sharing video, such as Skype. Now, sourcing traffic is the first step that involves an actual interaction with your potential customer. And I mean, it's as a woman, I found the type of advice that was being provided about being flirtatious or believable to be almost amusing. So example of that here is to spell incorrectly and use emojis, because that's apparently how women talk. But the main purpose is to make it seem like you're a legit girl. Girls who text apparently never use perfect grammar and always use emojis, but you should prevent using the crosses at the end because that's really overused. The next step involves negotiation. So you might, before you settle on a price, exchange some previews. So for example, some clothed shots, not the nudes, or even some more provocative ones in order to make people more inclined to pay. This is also where the verification images might be traded to try and create some trust between the customer and the actor. The going rate is contentious as to how much you want to accept as payment, because it's argued on the forum that people should not accept too low a rate, as this would hurt the other people engaging in eWhoring, who would then be competing with that amount. It's also suggested that there's different ways that you would negotiate. You could just offer a going rate, or you could let the customer suggest the price and then haggle after that. And this was seen as something of a challenge. It was described here as an art, the art of manipulating people in their favour, getting out of every tight situation and coming up with straight answers of things and imagination. This can't be taught, this must be learnt. So it's important that the steps are followed in the right order. So the payment should be received after the price is agreed, but before the images are sent, because you don't want to find out that the customer has actually ripped off the scammer. So it's recommended that actors check that payment has been received before they send the images, and actually go and check that on the platform used to receive payment, because the customer might try and scam it by sending through a fake receipt. So after the payment has been received, the images can be sent, and this will depend on how this is done will depend on the type of communication platform being used. So, for example, if it's being done by email, it can just be emailed across, or a link can be provided to, say, a Dropbox account, and the images can be sent that way. For VCWs, it's suggested that actors use Manycam app. Manycam allows you to select the video as the input for the video stream on, say, Skype. So the customer believes that they're watching a live show, and the actor is actually controlling the video footage, as I showed you earlier on. Now, once the transaction has been completed, the actor has a number of options they can take. So they could block, or they could try and continue to milk the customer. So blocking involves ceasing all contact and moving on, perhaps to try another customer. Or you could continue talking in the hope of selling more images. You could target the same customer using another model, or you could try and turn it into a romance scam. So eWhoring, as described so far, will not be a kind of a classical traditional romance scam. There's no belief on behalf of customers that they're in any kind of relationship, but they could actually be continue to be milked in such a way and turn it into a romance scam using the same kind of methods we see in that space. So, for example, trying to request money for flights to visit the customer, but of course the actor never actually goes on the flight. Now, the final scene is involving exchanging funds. So it's enough that you've received the payment, but then you need to be able to transfer it to something that's usable for other transactions. So in order to retrieve the funds, it does depend on the type of platform that's being used. So I said before that PayPal and Amazon are the ones that we see the most of. For PayPal, there's two different types of accounts. You can have a verified account, which is linked to a bank account and is verified with the account holder's identification. And this makes things quite more simple in terms of receiving the money, but a little bit more risky in terms of your identity is linked to the account. There are unverified accounts that are possible with PayPal as well, and this is more difficult to actually be able to retrieve the funds from, and it does actually depend on the country. Now, Amazon gift cards, you can either buy goods on the Amazon platform, or you can convert the gift cards to another currency, and interestingly enough, Hack Forums has a currency exchange board that allows users to transfer things like PayPal and Amazon gift cards in exchange for other currencies. So this is an overview of the currency exchange on Hack Forums. We can see in red, PayPal is very, very popular, up there with Bitcoin. And in black, Amazon has really started to take off since around 2015 and has become quite popular. This chart indeed is quite interesting overall. We can see where Liberty Reserve has been taken down after an investigation into money laundering, and this then corresponds with a rise in the use of Bitcoin. But we do see Amazon gift cards and PayPal being used for eWhoring, and we can also see that these are being exchanged on hack forums in order to try and extract the monetary value from them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are kind of ways that actors may deviate from scripts, and there's a number of different alternative tracks that they may use. So one of them is trying to blackmail customers. So, for example, making them believe that they've actually been in communication with a young person, and blackmailing them for money to allegedly stop them being reported to the authorities. Affiliate marketing involves things like sending links to the images using affiliate marketing URL shorteners. So this means that when the URL is clicked on, before the customer is taken to the images, they're first shown a brief advertisement, and the affiliate marketer, in this case the actor, receives a very small payment for each advertisement that's viewed. Malware can also be added onto the images, and they can be used as a channel for distributing malware in that way. Actors can also exclude the second last step by not sending the images and scamming the customer altogether. But this is actually discouraged on the forums because it makes it again causes harm to the entire eWhoring community if customers can't trust the models. And the final one is referred to as double dipping. This involves telling the customer that there's been a problem with the payment when there has not. So maybe altering the indication that payment has been received to make it look like there's been a problem with that, and sending it back to the customer and trying to get them to pay a second time. So in the paper, we outline a number of different intervention approaches, one for each of the various stages that I've described here. I'm not going to go into detail here, but if you'd like more information, I do encourage you to look at the Understanding eWhoring paper. One thing I would like to point out here, though, is that for all intervention approaches, it's really important to consider the unintended consequences of the intervention. So what about those caught in the crossfire? Most people who are online are law-abiding, and some of the interventions involve creating additional nuisance for them. So, for example, being required to do more account verification when opening new accounts for things like email, online platforms, linking that to phone numbers and so on. This can create additional nuisance, also privacy concerns. And there's also impact for those that are maybe already more marginalised. So, for example, those that are involved in legitimate sex work. What if their images are stolen and added to a hash list that prevents them from being shared online? And there's kind of inadvertent disruptions to people's legitimate livelihood, and these are people who may be already quite marginalised in society. And we also have a think about some of the future directions that we might see eWhoring going in the future. Things like the current pandemic might actually open up new customer bases for actors. Another thing with technology is the possibility of creating photorealistic simulations of models, or what's called as deep fakes. And there's questions to be raised here, like, does this actually reduce the exploitation of real people if the images are entirely simulated? But also, how does this relate to the commodifications of women's bodies, and is it appropriate for men to profit from this? Also, does the portrayal of more extreme encounters lead to unrealistic expectations, particularly for young people? It's also interesting to think about the demand side. So why are people actually engaging on these platforms and becoming customers? Are they lonely? Is there a need for things like social chatbots to overcome this? Is there opportunities for actors to actually use their skills in legitimate ways? Policy can also have a big impact in this space. In the UK in 2017, it was proposed that those who are accessing pornographic material should actually go through an age verification process. And we believe this actual proposal has actually been dropped, but this could potentially have opened up new opportunities for fraud. Indeed, we did see some discussions for fraud opportunities requesting that customers go and visit a website and input their credit card details to prove that they're over 18, and being assured that this transaction was not actually going to go through, that they wouldn't have any money taken out of their account when, of course, their credit card details were being stolen. And the other future direction is trying to quantify how much is happening in the eWhoring space. And we've actually since published a second paper on this called Measuring eWhoring. And if you're interested in that, the details are down the bottom, and we try and quantify where images are being taken from, how much money eWhorers are making, and so on. So thank you very much for spending time watching this presentation. I would like to thank the Cambridge Cybercrime Centre for access to the data, the Internet Watch Foundation for their assistance. In particular, they helped us verify that some of the images involved were of child sexual exploitation images. The funder for the research project was the UK Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, and the person who provided the wonderful illustrations for this is my husband, Paul Bennett. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.